Oh,
Hello,
Hello, how are you doing?
doing
I'm
well.
doing fine.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Please.
I'm going to go ahead and start off with the introduction. Today we have Michael Privot, who is the director of the European Network Against Racism, an organization which considers itself the voice of the anti-racist movement in Europe. To learn more about European Network Against Racism, you can visit the link that accompanies this discussion. On the other side, we have Fredrik, who is a concerned Scandinavian citizen with an alternative viewpoint. We're going to start off this discussion by allowing each person to give an opening statement. Michael, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you very much, Kevin. Um, I would just like to start by thanking you for making this debate possible. I think it's very important that all sectors of society are able to have a peaceful and respectful discussion, even so if we are from very different angles and from very different opinions. I would just like to make the following statement. Following the initial TV interview of mine that sparkled this discussion, where I was questioned about the issue of anti-white racism. And I was making the point that anti-white racism in Western society, majority white societies, is simply a fallacy. The fact is that it triggered a lot of questioning and a number of hate mails as well. But I think that I was not portrayed in a good way. I of course maintain what I said, but I think that my discourse is needed to be a bit more elaborated. I will try to make it to keep it short, but just to say that anti-racism has its own concepts, its own tools, and of course this is highly ideological. I mean, it's engaged the type of society that you want to live with, and therefore it's a major site of ideological battle. Every single concept of anti-racism has been discussed and is still being discussed, and therefore it's no wonder that this concept of anti-right racism has been emerging very recently, let's say over the last 5, 10 years, being a bit more spread within the debate. And I think it's very important that we recognize that, of course, in any kind of societies there are different types of hate, and then definitely within minority communities in Western societies there is hate shared towards white people, but this cannot be equated as racism. Racism is about a power relationship. It's a theory, or not only a theory, but a way to analyze power relationships within societies. And it's not possible to equate the oppression, the discrimination that minority communities of all sorts, I mean, not only about color or race, but also about sexual orientation, about disability, about age, whatever you want, are facing in a specific society, with the hatred the small group within those societies are having, experiencing or expressing towards people from the majority society. So it's extremely important that we keep the things clear for the sake of the debates, that we understand where we are. And so we from an anti-racist perspective, we see as this new anti-right racism as extremely dangerous, in the sense that the bottom line argument is just to say, well, yes, white are racist towards black, but blacks are also racist towards white. So I mean, everybody is racist at the end of the day. Everything is equating everything, and therefore, unless black are not trying to correct the racism, there is no point for us whites to change things on our side as well. Negating the fact that, I mean, white people in Western majority white societies are the people in power, and therefore they have the bigger responsibility to try to shift the power balance within society. So this is the bottom line of the argument, and why I wanted to make it clear that the fact of negating the issue of anti-right racism in Western societies does not mean that we negate the fact that, yes, indeed, there is some hatred towards white people from different ethnic minority people, for example. Yeah, and I will stop it at here.
Okay, Frederick?
Yeah, well, I have kind of a different view, but I'll start with it now. The way I see it, what we have today is a policy of immigration into all white countries, and the immigration is only forced upon white countries. If Senegal wants to close their borders tomorrow, they're not going to be accused of racism or Nazism. And Japan is homogeneous, so it's only white countries that must have immigration and must have multiculturalism. The goal, to me, seems to be to mix together, but only in white countries. Saudi Arabia or Japan are not being forced to become a blended humanity. Only white countries are forced to do this. So they push these policies by using a lot of nice-sounding words. For example, hope, and equality, and diversity, solidarity, or freedom. It sounds very nice to talk about freedom in order to get immigrants into the country. I hear it is said things like, everybody should be free to choose to live wherever they want. But once they've gotten a lot of immigrants into the country, they stumble onto a problem because we whites are actually use this freedom to move away from this fantastic multicultural society. This is what is referred to as white flight. Once they've gotten a lot of immigrants into the country, the anti-white mentality continues. They stop talking about freedom and start talking about forcing integration. This is so that they get the non-whites into white areas. After they have done this, they start to promote intermarriage and assimilation. This is when they start to demonize people who are against intermarriage, calling them racist or Nazis, and then they talk about a brown future. And after they have said all of this, they appear not to understand why we call them anti-white. So as a summary of what's happening, the way I see it, we have immigration into all white countries. Immigration is only forced upon white countries. The next step is to have integration by using free will as an excuse. If this doesn't work, then integration must be forced. The next step is to promote intermarriage and demonizing people who are against it, while saying that a brown future is inevitable. They claim that everybody is going to be mixed, but in the real world it's only forced upon white countries. This leads to a world without whites. On the other hand, a policy that will result in a world without Jews or blacks would be called genocide. But when it happens to us white people, it's very often described with nice words like a melting pot or diversity. So again, if one supports a policy that leads to a world without Jews or blacks, it would be called genocide. So if I protest this development, I am very often labeled a Nazi who wants to kill 6 million Jews. So they say they're anti-racist, but what they are is anti-white. And that's why we say that anti-racist is a code word for anti-white. So this is how I look upon the situation. It might differ from you. So do you have anything you want to say?
Probably plenty. I guess as much as you have to say about what I said. So how do we proceed? Shall I try to bring a few arguments with regard to?
Yeah, I guess you kind of disagree with what I said.
Yeah, I definitely disagree with what you said. Yeah, for sure. I think. Well, I mean, there are many things that you said on which we could go. And probably this we will come back to some of the arguments that you've been saying in the follow-up of the debate. I would start by saying that I've been reading some of the literature of what I would say your movement, and I'm a bit surprised in the sense how what strikes me is the narrow approach that is taken to look at, for example, the phenomenon of immigration, and that's why I'm a bit puzzled by the classification that you do and how far you understand whiteness. For example, I mean, if we look at the migration flows within the world, and look at the proportion of migrants within, I would say, Europe. I mean, this is the place where we both are apparently. So let's take it as a things might be a little bit different in the United States, but not that much. If we look at the population of Europe, which is, if we take, I mean, all Europe, geographical Europe, there is something like 71 million migrants, right? And which is extremely interesting is that from those 71 millions out of 800 million, so not even 10% of the population, we have nearly 70% of the migrants are whites from the different countries of Europe that are moving to another country. So the bulk of migration within Europe is about whites moving to another white country. So the real tiny part of the migration, which is for people with another ethnic background, if we take all white ethnicities, if I can say, in one single block, is really a few million people in Europe, and therefore it's extremely difficult for me to understand how this can threaten, I mean, the disappearance, or to make a whole ethnic group or ethnic groups disappear by getting into marriage. And I have also, that was my first point. Maybe the second point I would like to make is also about how you understand anti-racism. I'm very surprised how I find myself, well, not myself, but the ideas I'm trying to defend being portrayed, and specifically about intermarriage. I've never seen anywhere that marriage is intermarriage, interracial marriage is forced on anyone. I mean, yes, of course, there is a discourse about a blended society, and where, I mean, people are mixing, and that's part of it. But there is a difference between having some sort of positive discourse about the fact of mixing each other, and the fact of forcing our people to intermarry, which is something that I've never seen in any kind of anti-racist literature. Okay, just to
I can address those points.
Please.
Now, first off, when you talk about the number of immigrants and so forth, well, in America, it's, statistically, it's official now that if the present trend continues, whites will be a minority in 2042. And you see, whites will be a minority in Britain in 2066. So you see the trend, and it's the same trend in every white country. So whether it is also moving white people into Britain, white people will still be a minority in some decades. So you see the overwhelming trend is more and more non-whites and less white people. And of course, this leads to a world without white people in the long run. And that is what it seems to be anti-racism is all about. It's not anti-racist, it's more anti-white. And when it comes to the point of intermarriage, well, the typical anti-racists, as I say, promote intermarriage, and they often condemn people who oppose it. So then they talk about a brown future. So it seems that their intent is to get rid of white people just by the policies and what they support. More non-white immigration. We will be a minority. That's the trend. And then assimilate. And then we will first of integrate and then assimilate and talk about the brown future. So, I mean, just how I see it, the number of white people moving from Germany to France or whatever doesn't really have anything to do with white people being a minority, which is now official in places like Britain and United States. So for me, it seems like all of this anti-racist talk is just anti-white. It is about more non-white immigration, or essentially anything that leads to less white people.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, what I see personally is I think there is a kind of and again I would like to come to the issue of demographics, but I think that the point is that Europe, however you see it, is majority predominantly white, 90% white. So I mean, even by the most depressing statistical and demographic forecast, this would never change by 2050, right? There are different things for that. The first is, of course, I know that there are some people playing with statistics that like to do some scaremongering, and they base their analysis on the fact that, for example, migrants from different, say non-European countries tend to have higher birth rates than European societies, which are more or less stabilizing, but around 1.9, 1.8, 2.0, 2.1 child per woman, right? Which is roughly around the renewal rate, if I can say. And so indeed, there has been in the past, in the 60s and the 70s, even 80s, when the first important wave of migrants from non-European countries came into Europe. I mean, they were coming from countries they were just beginning or had not even begun their demographic transition. As you might know, the demographic transition in any country is linked to the alphabetical the rate or the level of alphabetization in a country. So once the population, the female population in any country is reaching 50% of literacy rate or alphabetization rate, the demographic is the number of children per woman is completely falling down, and this has been proving it's a universal kind of truth, right? It has been proved all over the place as far as statistic goes. I mean, and of course, the first country that went in this transition were Britain, England and France, and it was around their own revolution in the 17th century for Britain, and the French Revolution in 1789. So we have a long history of seeing this, and we see this happening in all the countries, right? So it's very interesting to see that apart a few countries of Africa that are now reaching this level of alphabetization, and then you see the curves that are just going down, and you can see this in all Middle Eastern countries where the number of children per woman is exactly the same as in Europe, right? So which means that yes, indeed, past experiences of migration might have created a kind of the fear that migrants come and have a higher number of children, but it's absolutely not true for the second generation, which is here, and definitely not true anymore for those migrants that are coming here, because in most of their countries, they have gone through the demographic transition. So which means that at the end of the day, the catastrophic numbers of people or birth rate of migrants that would kept the same over the generation is absolutely untrue. And therefore, the dramatic forecast for 2050 needs to be completely revised. So that's definitely something that needs to be taken if we want to have some sort of serious discussion there. And I think, and then I would like just to come on another point on the issue of whiteness. I think that this is something definitely that you have to look into, and which I think is making your claim a bit weak, because if you look at which kind of whiteness are you talking about? The whiteness as it's defined in the United States is not the whiteness as it is defined in Europe. So how far can you apply the reality of the United States to Europe? Because if you look in Europe, I mean, people, Spaniards, Italians, Czech, Greeks are considered as white, right? But if you look at the massive the migration trends in the United States specifically, it comes from down south most massively. And how far do you consider these people as white or black? That's the whole issue, and it's completely different. You could say, well, if people from Spanish descent in Europe are white, you could argue that those from Spanish descent in many instances from South America are also white. So the issue of whiteness is also could be looked at completely differently. You see what I mean? And there, I think that there is also some inconsistency in the claim that, well, actually white people are just getting lower and lower in terms of numbers. How do you look at whiteness?
Okay, well, people call themselves anti-racists have no problems identifying white people when it comes to talking about slavery, discrimination, racism, and so on. You have no problem seeing who is white and who is not white. And in America and in my country, people say, well, an area is too white. We need more diversity. So everybody knows who is white. But it's very convenient when you're trying to get less white people to sort of pretend you not know it. So, but I clearly see that people who talk about multiculturalism and so forth know who is white. So when they talk about racism, discrimination, slavery, and so forth. Now the second point there. In America, as I said, it's 2042 that whites will become a minority, and if that's scaremongering, then, well, first of all, I see the trend, less white people, more non-whites. And of course, the government statistics say the same thing, they confirm the trend I'm seeing, which, so that would suppose that the American government, including the British government, is trying to scare people, and it's some kind of conspiracy to scare people, which, well, if that's what you think, you can think so, but so it does seem like it's more non-whites, less white people, and then we have integration, we have assimilation, and this trend continues. Now, with low birth rate, for example, and this point you brought up with, I don't remember exactly what it was, but if you go to Japan, you will see they don't have this number of immigrants. They don't have all this third world that's going into their country, although they have highly developed society and they have low birth rate. So this thing is not being used against the Asians or the Japanese because, as I say, for me, I see that anti-racists are not anti-Asian, they're anti-white. So this argument is always used against white countries, but not Japan, for example. So, yeah, that would be it.
Well, it's interesting exactly because it's exactly one of the points that you made and on which I wanted to come back. I'm still doubtful about the issue of whiteness, right? Because you kind of define like, when you see it kind of is the approach. Well, yes and no, because how we use it, whiteness and blackness are also categories that are there to understand per relationship, right? So it's not that clear cut. And to the extreme, you can see that you can be white in a society and black in the society next door because there is a completely different type of relationship, right? So I think that the question is not just about me trying to escape defining or getting into or on the contrary. I mean, it's important to understand what we are talking about, and it's extremely difficult. So if white people are in the United States, people from British, Irish, French, or Western European descent only, all right? Okay, that's you make you specify your group. But if you talk about whiteness as a whole, I mean, it's extremely difficult then to draw the line and say, okay, those people are just not white. I would just mention, for example, an example. We have it's very interesting when you come to the issue of whiteness. Recently, I've been confronted to the case of descent people, children of Italian descent in Northern Europe, right? So for decades and until very recently, they were considered so-called, you could call them blacks, right? So they were the foreigners, the people that were not willing to integrate in Belgium, France, the UK, Netherlands, and so forth, and with the change, with the European construction and everything, where, well, say all Europeans equate to each other, and when the discussion about migration is turning to a very different type of course, and when you have all these discourses about the clash of civilization and so forth, so from nearly one day to the other, those people, I say from Italian descent, that have developed their own identity as being a minority in other European societies, as being the oppressed. From a sudden, they become the oppressor. From a sudden, they move from the minority to the majority, from the dominated to the dominant. And some of them really cannot stand that. It's completely questioning their identity, right? So I just want to highlight this to say that those elements are relative. They are not genetic. It's about social perception. It's about construction. So I mean, I'm happy to go into this discussion, and I think that definitely this is something that's not, for me, I don't feel clear in how you articulate your discourse. And I think that for me, this is also a weak point in what you say, because it's very contextual, and that you cannot just apply whiteness as this to undermine what you are trying to do as anti-racist. So that's one thing. On the about Japanese and I think that you talked about Arabia at some point when you did your introductory speech. Well, no, I would say, yes, we know that Japan is a racist society, right? There is no point in that. There are anti-racist organizations like mine and others in Japan that are trying to get the society open and so forth. And in all the countries I've been to in the Middle East, and we have many members and connections with organizations in different countries of Africa, in different Asian countries, and so forth. So there is a vibrant civil society over there. There are people that are convinced by equality, by human rights, and they are trying to open up their societies because they see that their own societies are also in silos, and that there is racism over there too, and that migrants in those countries are also rejected and so forth. But I mean, we have also to be honest and recognize that if we are proud in Europe and in America and Australia, say the West by and large, to have developed those values, those rights as even the pinnacle of our civilization, right? That you cannot expect the same kind of mobilization in most of the other countries where the struggle for life, I mean, the basic right to life, access to water, access to even not a decent job, and to be able to raise up your family, is still very much a priority. I would say that I know it's a bit provocative, but anti-racism in that sense, it's a bit like a luxury, right? But they do exist. They are those organizations that do tremendous work to change their own society. So you cannot say that anti-racism by and large is about only for whites and to open white societies and so forth. There are anti-racist organizations working in all countries that I can know about, and they are trying to open up their societies as well. And we've seen, like, I would say, the Ivory Coast, that has been developing awful discourses about the ivority, as they call, of people. We have racist legislation in most of the countries, right? But there are people fighting for it. So I think it's just also a matter of time when those societies will be able to have the same discussion that we have now. And I'm sure we're going to have discourses similar to yours, saying, well, it's about our Arabicness or blackness or Asianness or whatever you want to call it, that is being threatened by this flow of migrants, of people from outside they want to intermarry and so forth.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to whiteness, as you say, well, as I just pointed out, I mean, people say that only white people can be racist, and when I talk about racism, when I talk about slavery, when I talk about these things, they see who is white. And I mean, you can of course go into the DNA and so forth, but generally known who is white, and I see that people see that all the time. So for me, it's more like an excuse to try to say it's very hard to see who is white, and if you just blend together, I mean, white people aren't really dying out because we don't really know who is white in the first place. So I see that more as an excuse. When it comes to Japan and anti-racism, the pressure that has been put upon, let's say, Germany after World War II compared to Japan after World War II, you see, it's completely different type of pressure. The pressure of bringing in third world immigrants has been put on white countries, non-communist sort of after World War II. But you see the trend in white countries, that's where the debate has been, that's where the pushing have been, that's where the immigration has been of third worlders, not to Japan. If it had been to Japan, there would have been much more there by now. And that might go back to the more general theme I see sort of so-called anti-racists talk about when I push them on this point, that they sort of want to mix everyone in the world. They want to mix Asians with black people and white people and everything, which then goes back to, well, what about diversity? If we're going to mix everyone, wasn't diversity a strength? And if you're going to mix everyone to become equal, where's the diversity? I mean, so it seems to be sort of what you really want is to argue for something that leads towards less white people or no white people. Don't seem to be so interested in diversity, for example. If you want to mix everyone, there's no diversity. But I could, of course, I don't disagree with diversity. I could say we can have a global sustainable diversity where you have white people in white countries, you have Asians in Asia, and so forth. But that kind of diversity would leave a future for my people. That would include white people in the long run. So I guess it's not that kind of diversity you want to have. Is it?
No, well, no. I mean, I think, well, we can have a very philosophical debate. I mean, in the sense that no, I mean, you mean the diversity. I mean, in my organization, and we are representing here hundreds of organizations in Europe. I mean, we for us, diversity is a fact of life. It will blend in some ways, it will not blend in others, but there is no willingness to force people to blend, to intermarry, whatever. And of course, we do recognize that for diversity, you need to have diversity, okay? So, I mean, if all the people become just the same at the end of the day, there is no point in that. The case for us is that, well, ethnic diversity is just a kind of diversity. There are many other aspects of diversity, and this will never die as long as there are human beings on Earth. The question is, I mean, in a reverse question that you can bring is, you know, why is it that, I mean, Asians or blacks or others would be so keen to intermarry with whites? Because at the same time, I mean, if you talk from just a racial perspective, all right, that is not mine, but I mean just as a hypothesis, right? So I mean, as you can say, and I know from people, I'm in contact from minority communities. You know, I'm in contact with people. They count themselves like 50,000, 60,000 remaining people of their ethnic group. So we are not talking about the you know, there are still hundreds of millions of white people around the world. So when even in those situations, they know that probably within 2 or 3 generations, their ethnic group will have disappeared, right? So we are going to lose some sort of diversity in that sense. But I don't feel there. Well, some share this, I would say, this fear of just getting diluted, right? Some others not, and say, okay, this is a fact of life. Diversity will appear somewhere else, right? So what is more concerning for me, and I just say first, we don't advocate for having all people from all mixed together, and then you are just all the same. So that's the first one. The second one is why. I mean, it's also frightening from any kind of ethnic group to get lost in dilution, right? So it's not only a typical white phenomenon to say, well, we are just going to be mixed and we are going to lose our whiteness. You can have black people feeling just the same and Asian feeling just the same. So, I mean, it's not that people come here just for the sake of intermarriage and being happy people around that. I mean, that's not true. And I would say that most of the people around the world are rather, I mean, clinging to their their ethnicity, their group, and so forth. And we think that yes, why not? As long as you don't prevent people from your own group to intermarry, and you don't break their life, and you don't. Yes, it's just finding the right balance between that. And I would just like, I will just give you a possibility to answer now, but I would like to come back on the pressure maybe later in the conversation that you said about white countries having to receive migrants after World War II. I think that's definitely a key argument that we need to discuss.
Yeah. Well, first off, what I see is that we have white countries and we must have immigration. If we oppose immigration, non-white immigration, we're called racist or Nazis. And of course, racism is outlawed in several countries. So, for example, my opinion that I express here today will be considered racist by a lot of people, and some might say, well, we should ban it. So there we have the kind of pressure. And then you do have a lot of non-white immigration, of course, as people see, and as some governments make statistic on. As I said, Britain will be a minority white in 2066, according to the official statistics. I mean, the year doesn't matter, and if it's long into the future, but I care for my people also into the future. So this is what I see happening, and then, as I said in my opening statement, forcing integration, for example. An area is too white. The government says it's the problem. We need more diversity, meaning we need more non-whites. And then you have white people around with non-whites, and then they're hoping, well, in that circumstance, to promote intermarriage, and then just let take care of itself, and sort of promoting a brown future. And so it seems like they're continually arguing for something that leads to less white people. And as I said, this pressure has not been put upon Japan. And even if it were put upon Japan, it will still lead to less white people if you did this to other people as well. So yeah, that's just so.
Well, okay, yes. I mean, that are definitely a few things here. First, let's not go into the discourse about free speech, but this is a completely different conversation. And I think that the fact that you are able to speak in a totally civilized way is absolutely fine for me. The thing is about having non-white people being encouraged to go to white areas. I mean, all the discourse about integration. It's interesting for me that integration was left a bit to happen by itself. Now we are talking about forced integration policies, and I guess you read the press and you see how minority people feel so bad about being forced to integrate. So that would be interesting to hear your position about integration with the people that are now here, that are citizens of the countries, and that will never go back. I mean, so getting rid of them is not a solution. I mean, it's first impossible to do. So how do you see that? I mean, so that would be interesting. So how your policy about integration that are seen as a result, as a response to the rise of intolerance in the country. So that's interesting. The thing is,
could you repeat the question?
Yeah, you seem to be very critical about forced integration, right? Or forced integration in most Western European countries is a result of policies meant to counter the rise of intolerance. And at the same time, you feel and you read how much people with an ethnic minority background are do feel bad and are concerned by the fact that they are forced to integrate in other societies. So, I mean, it's interesting to say that, well, who finally wants integration, forced integration, as you say?
Yeah, I can address that point if you want to.
Yeah, maybe, yes. I'm just making a few more points, and then if you can answer. And then the question is about, okay, I don't think that there is a state policy, right, to push people to intermarry. I don't see how you can sustain your claim with official documentation unless then you resort to conspiracy theories. That's the point. I mean, yes, there are policies to make that all neighborhoods are more mixed in a way, to try to disenclave a number of deprived neighborhoods. Okay, that's one thing. But making this as an argument to say, well, actually, this wants to lead to intermarriage, this I have no evidence whatsoever of that. Yeah, I would like maybe your views on those two elements about forced integration policies that are asked apparently by no one, and about, yes, this forced intermarriage that you see, as I understand, as a state policy.
Yeah, I can address that. Now, the forced integration thing is that we have all this non-white immigration, and the consequence of that is that white people are moving with other white people. That is white flight. And white people apparently want to live with other white people and preserve themselves. And that is viewed as racist. White people trying to preserve white people. So the state implements anti-racist policies, which is forcing non-whites into those white areas. And remember, now they're not talking about freedom, now they're not talking about that, now it's forcing. And then they promote intermarriage. They don't force intermarriage, of course, but having non-whites around whites, I mean, they hope that there will be intermarrying because that will lead to less white people. And then they condemn everybody who opposes intermarriage, as I said, racists, Nazis, and so forth. And they talk about a brown future. So, I mean, I'm looking at their intent, not necessarily specific policies, but then again, it is specific that they force integration after talking about freedom and so forth. So I don't really, do you disagree with this here or what?
Well, I know. I mean, I'm still very skeptical about what you say. I mean, I would be happy to see any kind of official documentation of that, because you cannot judge an intent. And I mean, the violence that is done on people being forced to integrate might be as violent as what is felt by white people of say the people that you represent, or the groups that you represent. That it would be interesting if a starting point for a discussion would be the similar type of violence that both groups feel of being forced to integrate to each other, right? Because as much as you feel that white people being sent to specific neighborhoods is a violence to them if they don't want, it's the same for people from ethnic minority background to be forced to go in white areas where they know it will be difficult for them to live in, and they will not feel welcome, and so forth. I mean, I just would like to say also that the fact that people, I mean, often, which is the missed point in the discourse, but that I think that seeing your approach to things, you might agree with that, is that if people go, and then I'll talk about ethnic minority people, tend to come to gather together in specific neighborhoods in all major cities and so forth, it's not often a question of choice. It's a question of necessity, right? And necessity at different level, of course, because you find a network of support with people from the same community. It's better if you have it right on hand rather than have to drive for 3 hours with your car. But second thing also, and most importantly, if people do come together in any kind of community-based living, and this could also be whichever other ground, not necessarily ethnic minorities, it's because people get together because they feel that the society is failing to protect them correctly. Therefore, the only protection that you can have is within your community. So I think that it's a broader questioning about the ability of the states to protect all its citizens and non-citizens, say basically all the residents, and make sure that anyone can move to any place in the country and be sure not to be harassed, be sure not to be threatened, be sure not to be beaten up. And I think that this is something of real concern. So I think that many of ethnic minority people would like to move in other areas, be able to set up or settle where they want to settle in a nice house where they want to live, respective to their needs, rather than being forced by the context, by the society, to live in often crappy areas because it's where also the houses are not entertained, where the streets are not entertained because these are not the voters. So basically people, well, I mean the majority society or the politicians do not want to put money into those areas because it's not a priority for them. So I think that this is something that we have to also to keep in mind in any kind of discussion.
Well, I agree that people probably want to live in nice houses. But what I'm looking at is, as I said, I mean, we have non-white immigration, and then it's being, and then white people move away, which is white flight, and then the government have forced integration, and then talk about a brown future. So there's they say this is tolerance, they say it's diversity, they say this, that, and the other, but the end result is, we're moving in a direction that it leads to less white people, specifically. And that has nothing to do with tolerance, has it? Or respect of differences, or all these nice kind of words is being used there. So, and it all seems to boil down to less white people. So I don't.
But I feel, well, I mean, also I completely disagree with your analysis. I mean, I understand, well, say, this feeling of being an ethnic minority somewhere. And what is very interesting for me, and this is where the change also leads, we need to look at history at different points. For me, it's what you're expressing, and I'm not putting any kind of value judgment on this. Is really, and the question for me is how we go about this. Is the feeling of white people that are losing power. I mean, you can say whatever you want. I mean, basically, the supremacy of the white race has been built on racism and making a difference between race. And of course, societies are changing. Maybe Western societies are mixing a little bit quicker than others. Also, this needs to be also extremely discussed when we see the mobility of people in Asia, for example, like Indonesia is extremely mixed society, and even maybe much mixer than much more mixed than Western European societies. So yes, this is part of it is the fact of life. But what I see very much, and this is how we analyze this anti-racism, is less. Yes, indeed, whites are realizing that they have to cut the cake in more pieces because there are more people asking for a share. Okay, and it was easy to neglect and to ignore this for the past couple of centuries, but now it's not possible anymore. So there is some sort of readjustment phase, and this can lead to the feeling that you have, and I think that they can be legitimate. I mean that well, things are changing, and then yes, we had our areas. We knew people in a certain way. We had some cultural and even say racial kind of milestones around us and signals and guidelines, and this is fading away. Okay, this can be threatening, and I fully do acknowledge this, and this can lead to really very strong sentiments. And I say again, and that's why I disagree with how you see things, and you probably, and sure, you disagree with what I see.
Yeah.
But the thing is, but I mean, if we can at least understand that our respective point of view, and then I can table in and factor in my analysis what you just say, which is a worldview that has a right in itself, even if
Yeah, but how do you think Jews would feel, or black people would feel, if you had a policy that would lead to a world without Jews, without blacks? Don't you think Jews would call that kind of anti-Semitic?
Again, these are things that well, the problem is that you can't compare, and I'm just not saying you can compare because Jews, blacks, or white. It's you can compare because we are not in the same kind of relationship and not the same kind of world as this happened in the past. I mean, you
How
cannot.
do you think they would feel?
Well, I think that they felt it in the past, and it's still very vibrant, right? So that's why I say I understand from using my, I'll say, an ethnic minority kind of perspective about the feeling you have, right? And how you can look at the world with those types of glasses. However, I fully disagree why you come to wear those glasses to look at the world. That's my point, right? So my further point would be you have the full right to look at things that way, but and this is where the anti-racism would be, is that it does not give you the right then to forbid people to choose their life, to move to another place, to try to do a good life, however they want to do it, to move around or, to intermarry if they wish to, from your own ethnic group or any kind of other ethnic group. You see what I mean? This is where I see the difference between, yes, you have the right to say this. You have the right to intervene into the public discussion, to say this is how we feel, this is how we see society, and so forth, which is legitimate. Okay, and I understand the reason why you can. Well, from my perspective, you are getting to that point, and the fact that based on this, you might take policies that are indeed racist at the end of the day because you base your analysis on a race perspective. And if all human beings are equal in rights and dignity, doesn't work. You see what I mean? So that's our anger.
Yeah, well, but, going back to being free to move wherever they want, I mean, this forced integration bit kind of doesn't go along with being free to live with who you want.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I agree with
yeah, so, yeah, but if I were to start an organization in a neighboring building to you in Brussels, do you think I would get any government funding, or what do you think would happen? Do you think that this view would be just accepted as well? It's great that we have people being pro-white, or how do you think those views would be heard, or what do you think would happen? Because I have a stronger suspicion that so-called anti-racist people would kind of not tolerate this, what I'm saying.
No, we would be fighting it. Very honestly. But that's
Yeah, because I also want to,
it, isn't it?
I want to see a world with white people also in the future, and you might not have that view.
No, I respect this view, and this makes sense. And my view is, I don't think that your view will ever happen. That's my point. I don't think that whatever happens. I mean,
Okay, so you think that the present policy would not lead to
yes,
any white? Okay, so
Yeah.
that, yeah,
because I think that I mean, when I first responded to one of your colleagues that wrote me an email after they saw me on the television and say I don't share your worldview. I think it's extremely pessimistic, right?
Yeah.
And it's not my temperament, and it's not the temperament and nature of the people I see around me and with whom I'm working across Europe. So I'm sure that in 100, 200, and 300 years they will all still be white people, and that's it. And there will be people with different types of colors, and there will be, of course, many more mixed people, right? That's reality. But I don't think that at any point in time in the future that we might see, and we don't know what the future will be. So I mean, even mankind might disappear if we go on with our stupid and ecological policies in the long run. Maybe no one will be ever there to see if there is only mixed people around. But I think my point of view, I mean, as anti-racist, that we don't force people to intermarry whatsoever. This is not the point. We are also against forced integration of any kind, right? And what we want is people to have the free choice to marry with whom they want, to build their life with whom they want, to move where they want, and then that's it. And if you can agree with that, and we can agree with that, then we can have our different worldviews, try to work in different ways, and trying to be respectful of that. And this is where we just draw the line. And I would disagree with you with the fact that those views that you are supporting do not receive public funding. There are organizations, there are political parties all across the EU that receive quite considerable amount of public funding and that are supporting the views that are one way or the other, maybe indirectly, but it comes around from the same kind of matrix, if I can say, philosophical matrix, say that way. So I don't think that you can also have this. As much as we say to ethnic minorities, stop victimizing, you have also to stop victimizing and saying that you don't have any access to anything. It is there, right? Maybe with difficulties, as much as many other minorities have extreme difficulties to get to any public funding because they are perceived as a nocivity or whatever you can say. So that's also something where you might debate a little bit yourself and try to have a broader picture of what is actually happening in our society.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my views being viewed by a lot of people are called racist, and then outlawing racism sort of puts a pressure on you. And I think you know this very well. And it's a funny thing because I hear that from when I discussed the so-called anti-racist, which I think is just anti-white, I see it as, some people say that white people won't die out, so we don't need to do anything to prevent it. Other people say it's inevitable, so we don't need to do anything to prevent the inevitable. So, I mean, I see just, those two kinds of views, and I also see that white people will be a minority and supported by the policies that you promote. So, but do you support more non-white immigration, or do you support integration? Do you support this?
We do support migration wherever it comes from. So we support free movement of people wherever. So if this leads to migration, okay. So I mean, permanent migration, so be it. I mean, for us, it's not an issue. On the contrary, I think that we gain in not being in silos. I mean, I think that history has amply proven, from what we can know from history, of course, that societies that tend to be turned inwards, they just tend to die because you just don't really, I mean, renew the stock, the ideas, the creativity, and whatever that you want to say. So, I mean, and this is how life goes. My question is, what do you have so much to fear? And this may be the bottom line question of not having any kind of white people anymore, like not having any blacks or Arabs or Asians anymore. I mean, if you look at 1,000 years in the future, probably, I mean, none of the ethnic group that we see today will be there. Other ethnic group might appear or whatever. So what's at stake there? What's at stake? I mean, what are the fears that you say? I mean, is there something so specific that makes it a difference? What is more important? Isn't it more important than the genes that you have? Isn't it the culture, the civilization, the values that you are putting forward? Because we live by the values, we don't live by our genes, do we?
Well, I mean, you could send the same question to Jews. I mean, why do you Jews care if you die out? I mean, why would you care so much about that? And that might be considered sort of anti-Semitic. So if you put it around, it doesn't seem so good. I mean, or black people, who cares if there are no black people here? Can't you just die out? I mean, and then you said, well, it might be that there will be no more white people in the future. You saw that a great possibility. Then again, earlier you sort of said that white people would be here forever. But now you're saying that there is a great possibility that there will be no more white people. So
we are just playing with.
And the policies we have today leads towards less white people, and I think you support those policies that leads to less white people. So,
I'm not supporting policies. I think that this is where I think you're lumping things together. I mean, we were just talking about hypothesis. My hypothesis on which I'm working is that in the next few decades or 100 years, I mean, whites are no way to disappear, right? In any way disappearing. In the long run, in the 1,000 year, we don't know. So, and none of us will be there anyway. And maybe race categories will completely be irrelevant, and other categories will be there so that men can fight each other, right? What we are as anti-racists, we are not trying to say that we are not trying to diminish the number of white people on the earth. What we just want is just equality, and that people can just do what they want. Full stop. I mean, and if you as a white want to marry as a white, okay, so be it. But the consequence is then, as much as we don't have to prevent you, say, to marry with someone from the same group than you don't have to marry. They forbid to someone to marry or to marry or whatever, make a couple with someone from another group, another culture, another language, another religion, whatever you mean. And this is where we have a difference. And this is where if we go down the line of your logic, and then imagine that you would become in full power in a country, and you would like to implement the policies that are meant to defend, say, a white a white group, whatever. It will lead automatically to racial policies. And this contradicts the fact that all human...
It will lead to what?
To racial policies of segregation or whatever. You see what I mean?
So you rather have white people disappearing?
No. It's not the point. It can be. It's not the point. It's not the willingness of white people disappearing. It's a question about equality. So if you posit equality for everybody, at the end of the day, all groups all groups could eventually, if all people are mixing together, which I think will not happen, probably in any kind of near future. But take this as an hypothesis, right? And all people would intermarry. There is no racial group at the end of the day. So all groups are disappearing. So what? Is it the end of mankind?
No, it's the end of my race. And
but why race is important in any kind of sense? And you could say for any group, as you said, like black.
Yeah, every group you want to do away with, you could ask that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I
to Jews too. I mean, why is it so important for you Jews to continue to exist? Can't we sort of force you to integrate with someone else?
We have to accept that a group wants to exist and to perpetuate a certain question of life. And I mean, and about Judaism, it's a very complex question because there are all things intermixed with culture, religion, ethnicity, and so forth. So it's a very specific kind of group anyway. But even the question is okay, so what in the future? I mean, you cannot know. So, but we can understand from a one hand that people might want to be protected, right? And if you look into what's happening in Europe, let's take this. I mean, the fact that Jews want to be protected does not go against any other group, does it? As the same right, if whites want to gut and just marry themselves and have their own neighborhood and so forth, as long as it's not a state policy, right, that prevents people on the ground of their race, which is something completely constructed. And as we had earlier in the discussion, how do you define race, right? Come back to this. That you start putting in place those policies, then we have really an issue because it means that you start excluding others from the enjoyment of rights. And that's where this becomes a problem from an anti-racist perspective. But not on the fact that by free will, people want to stay together and they don't have an issue if someone from any kind of other group joins them for a while, then leaves, come back, whatever.
Yeah,
see the point? See where the point is?
It sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you talk about, I mean, I hear all these politicians talk about nice words, freedom and so forth, yet we have forced integration. And I don't see so anti-racist protest all this forced integration. I rather see they support forcing integration and complaining something is too white. And this is just what I see, and this is the trend. I mean, see, we will be a minority, not in some 1,000 years, but white people in America in 40 years or 30 years, and in Britain in 2066, and this is a trend all over. I mean, so talking about equality and so forth, well, it leads to more non-white immigration. That is the pattern we have. That is what is. So
I agree.
Sort of make it confusing here. We're talking about all kinds of.
Difficult. It's not an easy. It's very difficult. I do agree with that. The point is, it's not about just having nice words. The question is, okay, what if white people are a minority? What's the point? What's the problem with that? I mean, is there anything written in the soil of Europe or America that this needs to be white only population? No. I mean, white people came here longer ago than new people coming here. So who has there is no kind of endemic genetic right to pertain to a certain part of Earth, full stop. And then that's how it is. So what if whites become a minority? I'm trying to just spell out what the issue is.
It's
not just the presentation of an ethnic group, which is so vague that how do you? Is it just about color? But then I mean, I said that it's to a certain extent it's also irrelevant. So how do you circumscribe your group? I mean, if you remember the dark side of history, I mean, Nazism was not considering Slavs as white. Okay, it was a completely inferior ethnic group, but now they are part of the same of white people, right? So you see that the boundaries of whiteness are constantly, and other colors are constantly being redefined. It's changed from one country to another. It's different between Europe and the United States and so forth. So then you have really a question here. So if even they become a minority, so what? That's the point. What's the question that we can raise here? And then the question is about in this world of values. I mean, definitely. I mean, we as long as you posit equality, and this is one question that I want to ask you. I mean, are you positing equality of all human beings, whatever their ethnic group? From what I've read from you, it's not very clear. I mean, it doesn't go too much into those kind of details. But if so, I mean, is the question of race interlinked with culture? And this is clear as well. And so, well, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit confused. Sorry, maybe just, yeah.
Yeah, equality. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, I think that every race should have an equal right to preserve itself, I think, and that includes us white people. But sort of, that's what I see, the talk about equality, and the result is more non-white immigration.
But yeah, but I mean, as much as the white, what do you do with the white immigration, right? You know that recently, in the last couple of years, there have been more white people leaving in, the UK than non-white coming into the UK. How do you table that in your reflections? What do you do with that?
No, that's white people moving around. I mean, what I'm talking about is white people.
Migration. I mean, a white person that is leaving the UK to get another life elsewhere, it's migration as well.
Of course, it's migration.
It's only a black factor, so that's also white. So white are migrating as well. So how do you table this? So people are moving in all directions, basically. So that's the one thing. And so you.
And why do you think so many white people are moving out, though?
Because they,
Where?
like migrants from, say, Africa or Asia might be coming to Europe or the United States or Australia to have a better life. There are white people just moving to another place because they think they can have a better life elsewhere. That's it, and that's fair. I mean, that's just normal. It's a fact of life. Most people just want to stay in the place or around the place they are born in, or they've been. I mean, and there is a percentage in every group of people that want to go to find another life that is suiting their dreams. That's part of mankind. That's always all people have been doing.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yes, that's part of it.
Yeah, just what I feel is sort of that I try to bring this to a more bigger picture here, where you have, as I say, we are being a minority, first off, as the trend to not being here. This seems to be forced. It's not about Poles moving to Ukraine or Germans moving to Sweden. That won't make white people a minority. So yeah, people move wherever they move. But it's sort of the general thing is that non-white immigration into all white countries. And if you post that, you're called a racist, Nazi, and so forth. So it's forced on all white countries, as I said in my opening statement.
Well,
and
okay, sorry.
Yeah, and then this entire policy leads to less white people. So you talk about migrating and so forth, but yeah, that's just a policy I see. So
well, the question then, I think, it's something I wanted to come back about World War II. In your view, tell me, who put the pressure to get migrants after World War II in Europe?
Well, they started talking about getting rid of racism and Nazism.
Because I would like to, in your analysis, who is responsible for that?
Who is responsible for opening up the borders?
No. For you said after World War II, and I would be even more precise, within the 60s, for European countries, who has been the drive for getting non-European migrants in Europe?
The ones I would describe as anti-whites, ones who call themselves hippies or anti-racists. Or
No, not at all. And this is where, I think that there is a big issue in your analysis as well. The policies of migration have been put in place within the 60s and the 70s, specifically by the conservative and the liberals. Okay? Not by the leftist, progressist liberals. And I say liberals is economic liberals, right? So people from the center right to the right of the political spectrum. They were key to get migrants here because they did not want in the 1670s invest into their companies, into their companies, and renew the tools and everything. It was at the end of the golden 30s where the enterprises were just getting old and so forth, and they preferred to import cheap labor rather than to invest into the tools. So it's politics that were driven not by the left progressists, but the right conservatives all over Europe,
Oh,
right?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and then they just left, and the anti-racists were not definitely part of this movement, to be honest with you. And the anti-racists came afterwards to try to deal with the issues that were starting to happen, because they just wanted the government to import this cheap labor, and then human beings came, not cheap labor, right? And they were absolutely no clues about how do you deal with that, how do you manage that, how do you help people to access language courses, and as long as people were just working and shunting their mouths, it was absolutely fine, right? So I think it's interesting to look at who the responsible people are and where this is coming from, because then you can see, okay, this is all about economics. This is all about people wanting to make more benefits rather than invest, and this is why this is completely different in Japan. In Japan, they didn't do that. They kept investing in their own tools and building on their own population. I think it's racist, okay, but this is the choice they make. In Europe, it was completely different, and you cannot
Yeah.
blame the anti-racist for that. To be very honest,
Well,
so we are
you
trying
know,
to help cope
the,
with the consequences. Huh?
okay. Yeah, the conservatives and liberals, I mean, there's sort of, if you ask a conservative is racist, he will say, of course, he's against racism and is for multiculturalism. And it's the same underlying major assumption in both conservatives and liberals, left and right.
Yeah, but in
So
the
it's the same worldview. It's sort of, but the right way of the anti-whites tend to use economic arguments, say, well, we should open up our borders because we're all equal. You know, they use the same type of language to get more immigrants into the society. The left tends to use more humanitarian reasons for getting non-whites into the country. But if you take those two against each other, I mean, what is humanitarian about taking highly skilled Africans into a white country? There's nothing humanitarian about that. And then again, having a lot of refugees here is not economically beneficial. So, but they're always arguing for more non-white immigration. But yeah, that's both sides. I mean, I'm not saying that the conservatives in power aren't anti-white. Of course they are. That they have the same underlying mentality as the left wing.
Yeah, well, the thing is that now you have incredible a number of, I would say, the same kind of class, social class that led to forced, I would say not forced, that led to opening up that was asking for cheap labor migration in the 60s, 70s. A number of those same kind of people are supporting now this, what you can say, the real populist far-right discourses. So there is blatantly a contradiction here. So and how do you explain that? Because then that's really very strange that at some point, 30 years ago, I mean, those people say, no, we don't care. We just want cheap labor. We don't care about the ethnicity they are. It was not because they were anti-white or simply they didn't even consider those people as just human beings first, right? And then now a cluster of them is supporting how could I say, anti-immigrant and I would say, racist types of policies. I wouldn't say pro-white, but racist types of policies. So, I mean, it's important as well that you have an historical perspective of how things have been developing, and then you cannot do something 30 years back and then 30 years after complain and say, well, the others did it, and when the first responsible are the people that are also now in power and supporting a number of movements that are definitely or at the borderline racist, if I can say.
Okay, well, I mean, the conservatives supported immigration. Well, it's based upon the same type of arguments that we're all equal, you know, so it doesn't matter.
To be honest, it was not about equality.
Well, we were all equal, so we can bring in non-whites.
They wanted cheap labor, people that just shut them out.
Yeah, cheap labor.
Yeah,
they used a lot of different excuses, of course.
cheap
labor. It's good for the economy.
It was. Yeah, I agree with that.
So you have the conservatives saying it's good for the economy. Then you have the anti-whites on the left saying we need to take care of refugees. So you have two sides of anti-whites saying different things, and I think that the people who call themselves conservatives more and more now see things differently. They might see the result of what some of them were supporting, and they don't like it, so they turn away from it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've been. I don't know if there is anything you want to add. I think that we've been having a respectful conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, so I would, if I know it was not, well, with a final statement that, of course, I keep on disagreeing with you on the fact that anti-racist are anti-whites. I think that's definitely not how we approach things, and it's rather about people being equal and enjoying rights and the same opportunities in life. And it's not meant to be any kind of ethnic group, because then we would contradict ourselves in the very roots of what we believe in. But I would say that it was interesting for me to hear what you said, and yeah, and that was thank you for making this opportunity possible for two opposite ends of the spectrum to discuss in a respectful manner.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, you would contradict yourself if you were anti-white, and that is true. But I still see it this way. I did, using nice words, and the end result is more non-white immigration, more integration, and talk about freedom, but then yet it's forced. So, well, I guess we're still not agreeing here.
No, I think that we at least agree on the fact that forced integration is not something that we are looking for.
No, have you had any campaigns against it?
Yes, I think, well, campaigns to be, but many migrants organization, many anti-racist organization are, having campaigns against the integration tests and all those kind of stuff. Integration measures that are trying to force people to a certain set of values that are never clearly defined, not and yeah, I mean, about forced integration, yes, definitely. But I've not heard about structured campaign Europe-wide that would bring this stuff forward. But many organizations are trying to really go against at the national or the regional level, depending who is responsible for those kind of integration policies, to say, well, yes, of course, newcomers need to know which kind of dustbin bag you have to use, or how you have to sort your your dustbin, or that you have to learn about the language. You have to know the language of the country, because it's just also a matter of survival, and so everybody would agree on that. But for the rest, in terms of integrating into what, that's something that is very much questioned. So I think that at least on this one, we would agree that forced integration is good for isn't good for anybody.
No, it certainly isn't. It's the problem is it's too white, and we need to force integration. So, yes.
Okay, do we leave it at here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank both of you for coming by and doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fredrik. Well, maybe another time.
All right.
Yeah, maybe another time. Yeah.
Okay. Wish you a very nice day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.